Welcome to the Capitol Brief. I'm Seth Berensweig, and I'm here with my colleague John Tamney. John, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We are here to discuss lifting out of the pandemic pandemonium. We are perilously close to the release of vaccines. We are really in a unique historic pivot point because we are apparently going through some really dark weeks right now, but with a lot of hope right down and around the corner. Catch us up on how you see the lay of the land right now from a business and politics perspective.
Well, I'm confused about everything that's going on. I made sure in
I join you there.
in writing my book, When Politicians Panic, to get all my statistics from the New York Times and Wall Street Journal so that no one could say you were getting fake statistics.
Right.
Well, so the Wall Street Journal reports that 88% of the people who get the virus don't know they have it, or it's so mild that they don't even bother to go get checked for it. The New York Times has been reporting over and over again that 45% of U.S. coronavirus deaths are associated with nursing homes, which leaves aside all the old people more broadly who've gotten it and who have died with it. That's not to minimize old people, but it's a factoid that's
The data
of importance.
is what it is.
The
Yeah.
data is what it is. The CDC has reported that 94% of coronavirus deaths have happened with people who also had at least one other morbid condition that they were dealing with in addition. It tells me that if you get it, you don't have too much to worry about. The Trump administration is filled with people who've gotten it. We haven't heard about any deaths yet, thank goodness. So I don't understand why the excitement about a vaccination. I'm not against it. I'm pro-vaccination in all ways, but I would be skeptical about this one simply because, assuming I haven't already had this, why would you vaccinate yourself against something that generally isn't an issue for the vast majority of the global population?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I was taking a quick look at social media this morning and I saw a report from PBS that approximately 60% of Americans are willing to take the vaccine. That means that roughly 40% of Americans are not willing to take the vaccine. What would you say to those that would respond and saying, you know, by the time we hit January 1, we're going to have about 300,000 people that will have died from this vaccine. Many of them had comorbidities. It's a complicated story, but you are going to end up with a pretty significant number. If you do go with herd immunity generally, then those numbers are going to go up a lot. So how do you get business to be able to lift out of this pandemic pandemonium without a successful launch of a vaccination program?
Well, my sense is that business, if it were free to lift itself out, would have already lifted itself out. Let's remember that Target's had record earnings. Amazon stock is way up amid this. Walmart has had record earnings. Businesses that were allowed to continue to operate, that were allowed to use their genius at meeting the needs of customers.
Government stays out of their way largely.
Stays out of their way. They've been just fine. And so to me, it's always been a non sequitur, whether it's a vaccine or anything. If we want businesses and the economy to take off again, to start growing again, let people grow again. Leave them alone. Let them figure out a way. Why would you let those who created the DMV decide how businesses are going to operate? So I think you have to separate that there. With the vaccine, again, it strikes me that how dangerous for there to be a national plan to force people to take something that they don't necessarily want and maybe that they don't need. If 60% want to take the vaccine, that's a pretty strong number when we factor in all the people who've already had the virus and are already immune to it to begin with.
Well, that's true. They presumably have the antibodies, right? Well, you know, one of the issues that I was also looking at this morning and actually was on the air with another station discussing this particular issue is the question of whether employers can force employees to get vaccinated for COVID-19 as a condition of return to work and can do that under penalty of terminating them. And you know, the two observations that I have on that is from a legal standpoint, probably yes. The EEOC already said in the context of H1N1 that in public emergencies, companies can do that. But back to your point about the government not doing much to help or maybe even standing in the way, do you know that the EEOC has not issued one drop of guidance on how to help employers and employees understand how to handle that issue, what is permitted and required, and any suggestions on how to be able to work together to make that happen. So here we have the government saying, we want to roll this out and we want everybody to participate, but yet how are we going to be able to lift the economy out of this pandemonium and get small business back to work if the government isn't even able to give the most basic guidance and leadership?
Well, I guess I like that the EEOC stayed out of it. What do they specifically know about vaccines or viruses? It strikes me as always a good thing.
Well, they traditionally give guidance to companies so that they know that they can get into something without getting in the frying pan legally. So
But
just to
even
answer
then,
that.
why do we need this? I would prefer hundreds of millions of businesses try different things, try different ways. I support your point that a private business should be able to say a condition of working here requires this. So legal, I think, here also jives well with just logical. Businesses should be able to do what they want to do. Most don't need a law. I mean, I'll give the obvious example. Danny Meyer long ago removed smoking from his restaurants in New York. Well, he removed it in the early 1990s. The law didn't reveal itself until the early 2000s. It's just something he decided to do. So I think in your private place of employment, do what you need to do.
Well, one of the other things that you've raised that I'd like to jump into is what I call a tale of two economies. What's been going on as we get through this month of December as it relates to small business and as it relates to big business. Small businesses are getting crushed. There is a video that's really making its way around not only social media, but a lot of the national broadcasts about a woman in California who is devastated because she put all of this money investing in outdoor dining, and she did exactly what the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of California is expecting her to do. And then they issue a shutdown notice because somehow her outdoor dining is unsafe. However, on the other side of the same parking lot are just masses of outdoor dining, and the reason why they're allowed to do it is because they're considered, critical, necessary services. Well, what do they service? The film industry. There's actually there's a production company that has private high-end catering on one side of the parking lot. They're allowed to do that, but somehow she's not allowed to run her small business. So you have small businesses that are being involuntarily shut down. The PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, has not been renewed. These small businesses don't have access to large pools of capital or credit. And then you have on the other, and by the way, the government on Capitol Hill, from what I see, there's still a bunch of bickering and finger pointing, but there's still not even a bill on the Senate floor to provide some kind of interim relief. And I don't know if you've heard differently, but Schumer and Schumer and McConnell are just doing the typical finger pointing dance. So you've got the government either doing nothing for small businesses, or forcing them down with the kind of regulation that gets jammed down their throat, where they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. But then on the other side, as I think you might have started to allude to, you have big business, you have big corporations, you have big tech, you have Amazon, Google, you have companies that since the pandemic has started, the big four that were dragged before Congress and given a lashing about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act and all of that circus and parade, their market cap has increased by over $2 trillion since the beginning of the coronavirus. And in fact, big tech has really no legal limitations. The government doesn't know what to do to try to help encourage small tech. They have no regulation. They're trying to clobber them with antitrust lawsuits, which is a statute that was created during the time of steam engines. So you've got just really a tale of two economies. What can be done to try to, is there a way where the government can find some kind of a middle ground? Because really when it comes to trying to help both ends of the economy, Washington seems pretty clueless.
Well, I'll say to the story about the small businesswoman in Los Angeles, when the history is written of the coronavirus, it will go down as the biggest human rights tragedy of the 21st century. It's a young century, but nothing comes close. what they have done to small businesses, what they have done to workers, what they've done to people around the world. Remember, we're a rich country. There are 285 million people around the world heading towards starvation right now because Americans decadently decided to take a break from reality for a time and shut things down. So when we shut
Or we're
down,
forced to do so,
yeah,
right?
when we're forced to shut down here, the global implications are truly tragedy. And so it is a sad, sick thing. I will defend big tech in the sense that without big tech, there's no way these shutdowns could ever have occurred. Think about it. Imagine this happening in the year 2000, when most people, their job was a
Which is
destination.
kind of not that long ago, although
Yeah.
in the world of tech, it's centuries ago, right?
Yes, but in terms of technology, because of Moore's Law and all this, so 20 years ago, technology would have made it impossible to do this.
Right.
Because most people's jobs were a destination. You couldn't virtue signal on Facebook about how you were at home locking down because the internet was too slow. You couldn't watch Netflix at home back then because it was a minnow trying to get bought by Blockbuster. You still had to drive to get your videos back in the year 2000.
You couldn't order your food online because you didn't want your immune compromised
There was
parent. There was
no
like
ordering online back then. Think about it.
Right.
That was a creation of much faster internet in later years. Remember, Webvan went bankrupt in 2001, long before broad grocery distribution to the home was even a realistic concept. Think back to 2000. Amazon was a peddler of books, CDs, and DVDs. There is no way Americans would have ever put up with living at home for months and months
Right.
back then. And so
Right.
we can blame big tech, but in a sense, big tech made it possible for Americans to take this break from reality.
But why does government not get in the way of big tech and big business, but seem to be getting in the way of small business when small business represents approximately 50% of the energy and engine of the American economy? Is it because big business has access to capital and credit and lobbyists? Is it really that simple? What is it about? Why can't we get out of our own way when it comes to small business? This woman who was on MSNBC last night talking about this issue where they slammed her down, and then you have this opulent catering right across the way. I mean, it's heartbreaking. Why this stark disparity?
It's hard to say. The obvious angle to go is that big business has better They've got their men in Washington, and they've got their men in Sacramento and Albany to take care of them in instances like this. So that's the first thing I would say. I would add that most small business exists as a consequence of big business. Where a big business is where small businesses cluster around. And so I don't think it's so easy to say. I don't think it's realistic to say that small business is the source of economic energy. Big business gives them the fuel to get going. But broadly, I just want to ask the question, why can't people be free? Because this has also hit big businesses. Let's look at Disney. How is Disney doing broadly in response to this? Disneyland is still shut down. Disney World can't do what it used to do. Let's go down the list of AMC was once a big movie theater company. What's going to happen to them and all their employees? Mm-hmm. The list is very long of big businesses that are taking it in a very sickening way right now because politicians decided to not let those who got big by meeting the needs of customers figure out how to meet their needs during a time of uncertainty about a virus.
Yeah, the goal is for small to become big, right?
Yes.
And these companies used to be small. Mm-hmm. Facebook didn't just wake up one morning and just be a huge monolith. You know, you talk about freedom. Let's talk about how freedoms are being impinged upon today. When you talk about freedom, you're not only talking about the government getting in the way of businesses being able to operate. You're talking about the freedom to earn, the freedom to pay your mortgage, the freedom to pay your rent, the freedom to feed your family. Mm-hmm. There are growing caravans of cars that I see on the news that are lining up to get food handouts. These are people that they're great people that want to return to work, but they don't have money right now. It's not their fault. They didn't go to the government and say, hey, look, can you shut me down as an employer or as an employee? Help provide a limited window of defined benefits for 2020. But as soon as we hit December, when things are going to get really worse, take away the PPP funding, stop funding the unemployment funds on the state level so that everything dries up. They're not asking to go hungry. They're being forced into this position because government has no idea what to do. And I think it really is a problem that flows across both aisles. I'm not just picking on the current White House, but frankly, it's been an utter failure, and people aren't able to just live their normal lives right now. No wonder roughly 40% of people don't even want to take the vaccine because they don't believe fundamentally in the governmental institutions that to some degree have gotten us into this mess to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Why would you believe in them at this point, given the sheer ineptitude? Now, I would tend to say that any kind of PPP or other programs are a non sequitur because we weren't calling for them in February. In February, businesses were still free to be open, people were still free to go to work, and so they didn't need government help. And I think that's important to think about. These business owners aren't just prideful. So imagine the pride of having to go to the government because they're the only game in town for capital while things are locked down. I think that on its own is a hateful concept. But let's also consider what businesses are going through. They're not just doing this for money. This is love. This is passion.
It's their livelihood.
Yeah, it's livelihood, but it's what animates you. Market share is hard won. It's so difficult. People say, well, government's going to help them. They're going to send them a check, or they're insured. They've got business interruption insurance that actually works in this. This is more than that. A business that succeeds is a miracle. Mm-hmm. Suddenly their ability to do what
it's hard enough to grow anyway, even in an ideal environment.
In an ideal environment, it's incredibly hard to grow. Sure. Remember how many businesses were dying before this because of competition, because of the internet. Remember we were saying that Amazon was going to take shopping malls out. It wasn't true, but that was the argument.
Right.
And now these businesses are trying to survive, and they're saying, no, we'll give you a check for your troubles.
Right.
This is more
First,
than
we'll
that.
shut you down, and then we'll give you a check.
We'll give you a check for how insulting. Right. It's not just that Congress can't get its act together. It's that Congress decided to allow this in the first place. I find this really a tragedy.
Yeah, I think that, there and frankly, there's more than one branch of government that deserves some blame here. But one of the things that I think this also highlights is that we need as a country to have higher expectations for the government and leaders in America. We need to get out of this carnival circus, and we need to bring professionalism and leadership back in government. And by the way, by saying that, I don't mean to push back on the theory that your point that the most professional and the most prudent government knows how to just stay out of the hair of business and just let them grow and succeed. But there is such a low threshold of expectation of those who are in government and those who are in power in Washington. And I think that one of the things that hopefully we've learned a lesson from, and I'm talking about Democrats and Republicans and independents, is that you need professionals in Washington that know how the hell to do their job. We are sick and tired of the circus and all the theatrics in the atmosphere. These congressional committees have all of the big tech CEOs come in. They could talk about so many things about creative energy and how to be able to energize business and how to be able to grow the economy. But what do? Ted Cruz just asks a bunch of theatrical questions of Jack Dorsey. Who cares? Do your job. Mm-hmm. So let's take the elections a little bit more seriously on a federal and on a local level so that we can bring back professionalism, bring back guidance so that the people who are in charge know what to do and what not to do so that we can let these people, such as the business owner of the restaurant in California, be able to get back to our livelihood. That's what freedom's all about.
No, I agree. Obviously, we have somewhat of a different view about what government should do, but I agree that we should expect more of them. If they are going to run for Congress, if they're going to run for local office, we expect them to know what to do during times of trouble. Where I would disagree, or maybe we do agree, I want this to be local for this reason. I want people to choose their bliss. New Orleans,
localized government as it relates to regulating this?
Well, you go back to Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
What would George W. Bush have known about that? What would FEMA know about what was very specific to a city in the country that is below sea level? When people expect the federal government to be the answer to every problem,
Right.
they can be lax in how they elect local leaders. And I
Right.
think that's a problem. Remember, the mayor of New Orleans at the time was G.D. Bush, you get here and figure this out. And no, no, no. The point
Right.
was that you're electing a governor, you're electing a mayor, because what happens in New Orleans is not going to resemble what happens in California, where
Right.
earthquakes are the problem. Let's have answers to this in
Right.
advance.
Well, I think that one of the areas that the new Biden team has said that they're going to do is they're going to create a new dashboard technology to try to get a little bit more granular in what you're talking about, creating a dashboard by zip code so that there can be a better understanding of what's happening in different areas. What gets done for Boise doesn't equal what gets done for Staten Island. And I think that we need better cooperation and collaboration within the government. Let the vaccines get distributed and let people make their own decision, right? So I know that we're going to be starting to run short on time here, but we're about to turn a huge corner in January. We're going to be going through a difficult time where, unfortunately, there's going to be continued loss of life. But these vaccines are coming out, and I know that there are different viewpoints on that. If you could have a magic wand or at least sit down with Joe Biden and his team to decide what can be done in January, day one, from a politics and business standpoint to help lift things up out of this pandemonium, what are some of the pointers that you would give to that team?
The pointers would always be that the American people, you're brilliant. You created the most brilliant country on earth. We're going to rely on you, on your ingenuity, on your local ingenuity. We expect you to carry the major freight here. You know whether or not you need the vaccine. We expect you to figure that out. We expect local leaders to recognize your needs as people to get back to work. That's my ideal. I don't necessarily see that happening. I think, unfortunately, what we're going to see is a lot of politicization. It's going to be, well, people who believe in science are in control now, so we can get back to work. I know
Black and white, all or nothing.
very much. I know businessmen who've historically always voted Republican who voted for Biden this time, not because they wanted to, because they felt it would be terrible for their business if Trump still remained in office. As in, once Biden got into office, a lot of these lockdowns would end. Biden would provide governors across the country cover to essentially get on with things, because you don't fix a virus, you don't fix it with economic desperation. And as we've seen around the world, there's no correlation between it. France had very stringent lockdowns, yet it's had much higher death rates than what's happened in Florida, where the lockdowns have been much less than stringent. There's no
And more
correlation.
social unrest, by the way.
Are we surprised by that?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, my suggestion to the new team, and frankly to all of Washington, D.C., is talk less, hear more. Stop telling people what to do, but get into some kind of a listening mode to hear from your constituents what they want you to do. If you're going to have hearings, bring people in and have a conversation. Ted Cruz, stop trying to, take Jack Dorsey to the back of the woodshed and have these one-liners. They're really cute, but it doesn't really help anybody. There's not one person that gets helped by these hearings that talk about general immunity to try to bash big tech or to bash big business on the top of the head. Listen to people. We should have the legislators and the people who are our government leaders be better subject matter experts, listen to what's going on, and have a real true collaborative approach to talk to CEOs and talk to mainline workers and hear what do they want to have happen for them. It has to be a government, buy-in for the people, not to be imposed and slammed down on top of the people. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, well, we're asking politicians to not be politicians, and that's always the challenge. We're also asking them. We're probably maybe expecting too much of them. Let's not forget that the new chief of staff for President-elect Biden will be Ron Klain.
Right.
Ron Klain pointed out in an what would you call it, an event about a year ago. He said the Obama administration's response to H1N1 was disastrous. His point was, If this had been a lethal virus, the deaths in the U.S. would have been 60 million plus. This was from Ron Klain. It's
Right.
documented. It's
Right.
in my book. This is not fake news. And so the point
Right.
that's not a knock on Obama to me. What about being in politics makes you an expert on this? I
Right.
think presidents should be more about leading. As you point out, listening. What do people need? What can we do in a very limited way to
Sure.
help others do it? To
Yeah.
presume that they're going to be experts is to set them up always for
Right.
failure.
Well, hopefully January will be an opening. It will be an opportunity, and then hopefully people in Washington can listen better so that they can do a better job and let people get their liberty back. John, thanks so much for the conversation, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Yes.